have you ever wondered whether grammar really matters when you're learning a foreign language? Some people swear by it, while others say it's completely useless. And honestly, the language learning community is pretty divided on this. Hi everyone, and welcome to Andrea Marino Polyglot Experience. This is Andrea here, and in today's video I'm going to share my honest thoughts on this hot topic, grammar in language learning, and explain how I approach it across the different languages I study. What do I think? Grammar is important, very important, but it's not the center of language learning. It's not where you should start, and it's not what you should focus on the most. I see grammar more as a tool than a goal. Several studies also say explicit grammar instruction can help some learners, but it's not always the most effective way to build fluency. Grammar is far more useful once you've already had exposure and you're looking for clarity about what you've noticed in your target language. Grammar is a framework. It's a tool to help you make sense of how a language works. But exposure, listening, reading, and engaging with real content is what really helps. And when I say exposure, I don't just mean any listening or reading activity. The input has to be somewhat comprehensible, interesting, and relevant to you. That's what helps you notice patterns. In second language acquisition theory, this is known as the noticing hypothesis. The process where input turns into learning. In simple terms, exposure leads to noticing, and noticing leads to internalization. That's what I call learning in context. It's very different from what usually happens at school, where grammar is taught in a very abstract way, with lots of rules, tables, drills, lists of verbs, and other things to memorize. The focus there is on getting things right for your test, for your exams, for your essays. And once the test, the exams, the essay is over, most people forget everything they've learned. Mistakes are often treated as something to avoid, when in reality they are an essential part of language learning. Also, using your target language actively through speaking and writing forces you to test what you've picked up, which helps solidify grammar knowledge. And this is also why apps like Duolingo aren't always that useful from this point of view. You often end up practicing random sentences with no explanation of the grammar behind them, but without context or understanding, it doesn't really help you see how the language works. When you're just starting out with your target language, fluency, being able to communicate and make yourself understood, is far more important than perfect grammar. As you progress, accuracy becomes more relevant, especially for writing, formal speech, or situations where precision really matters. And of course, it also depends on the learner. Some people prefer and benefit from more explicit grammar instruction, particularly analytic learners or those preparing for exams. Others learn better with less focus on rules and more on immersion and communication. There really isn't a one-size-fits-all answer. That doesn't mean grammar isn't useful. In the past, I used simple reference books like Collins' Easy Learning, Grammar for German, French, or Spanish. I also recommend resources like Practical English Usage, which is less about memorizing grammar rules and more about understanding how the language is actually used, both spoken and written, or resources like this one, which I use for different languages. This is the one I use when I started learning Polish. Polish for Dummies, which strikes a good balance between dialogues, vocabulary and grammar explanations. I've also found the Teach Yourself series helpful. They don't overwhelm you with grammar, but mix it with dialogues and vocabulary in context. These are the kind of books I prefer, practical guides rather than heavy grammar textbooks. And today, with tools like ChatGPT, it's even easier. You can instantly check a structure, analyze a sentence, or ask for an explanation. That's how I think grammar should be. practical, simple, and always there when you need it. I've studied over a dozen languages, Romance languages like Spanish, French, Portuguese, Catalan, and Romanian, Germanic languages like German and Dutch, Slavic languages like Russian and Polish, Hungarian, which is an Uralic language which is not even part of the Indo-European family, even non-European languages like Mandarin Chinese, Japanese, and Standard Arabic. And here what I've noticed, if your target language is close to your native one, grammar feels less necessary. For me as an Italian, Italian and Spanish are so similar that you can often get by without studying much grammar when learning Spanish. And I would say this is the case of other Romance languages, with the exception of Romanian. And this is because in most cases, languages that belong to the same family share not only vocabulary but also the grammar. But when I studied Russian or Polish, grammar suddenly became essential for me. These languages have cases, they don't have articles, there are very difficult topics, for example the verbs of movement, and without some framework it's almost impossible to make sense of how the language works just from exposure. So here's my conclusion. Grammar shouldn't be ignored, but shouldn't dominate your learning either. Think of it as a support, something that helps you understand and use the language more effectively, but not the foundation on which everything depends. Now I'd love to hear from you. How do you approach grammar? Do you rely on it? Or do you prefer to dive straight into exposure and communication? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. See you in the next one. Bye now.